Okay, let's see. All right, it's 10 o'clock. It's about time for me to start my meeting so I can get a status update on where we are with our project. So I'm going to go ahead and dial in to our conference call. Hi, good morning. This is Sheila. Who do I have on the line? Hi, George. Morning, Crystal. Hey, John, Sherry, and Sandy. Okay, seems like everyone's here on time. I really appreciate that. So I'm just going to start with everyone and ask for an update on the work that you're doing so that I can then build out our status report for our leadership team. So I'm going to start with you, George. Why don't you go ahead and give me an update? I don't understand. What do you mean? What do you mean? I thought that that task was assigned to you, and I expected that you would have an update for me. You know what? There's a lot of background noise. I think somebody's having some sidebar conversations. If you guys could not only put your phones on mute, but pay attention to where we are, I think that would really help us as a team. So if everyone could just stay on mute and pay attention to the meeting, that would be great. Okay, so George, go ahead and finish. Well, wait a minute, Sandy. I didn't ask you to speak for George. This is really George's his update to give. So can you maybe not talk over George as much, and let him have his freedom to speak and provide his updates. Okay. All right. So why don't we move to you, John? Where are you? How are you doing? Okay. Really? Wow. So I guess I'm not clear on what's happening here, because I thought after our last meeting, we all walked away with, what the goals and objectives were and what everyone was required to do and come back with. But it seems like there was some miscommunication. So what I'm going to do is I'll try to schedule some individual time with everyone and kind of, help you through, get through what you need to get through so that we can get on track with our project. All right? Okay, thanks everyone. Have a good day. Bye. Wow. What just happened here? I don't know. Was there a breakdown in the communication process? Maybe I used the wrong mode of communication during our last meeting, or maybe the environment in which the communication occurred was not really conducive to the information being shared. That was a problem. So why is this a problem? Well, let me share some information. I listened to a TED Talk, TED Talk Speaks, and the speakers were David Grady and Jason Fried, and they talked about the effectiveness of meetings. According to Grady and Fried, 9 out of 10 people daydream in meetings. They're not paying attention. 25% of meetings are spent discussing irrelevant issues that are not even on topic, and 50% of people find meetings to be unproductive. Wow. If we think about how much time we spend in meetings during our day, the losses to an organization are significant in terms of the salary costs and also the risks that are incurred to their success if the workers are unable to complete their objectives and goals, right? So if we think about these facts, we can apply Kress's theory that for a group or team to meet the shared goals or objectives, there is a requirement of full participation from the members, meaning everyone has to, receive that information and interpret it so that they are clear on the direction going forward. There also has to be an environment that facilitates and encourages the learning process, so meaning learning through the acquired knowledge and relevant information, which is the goal of a meeting. So multimodal communication occurs in the workplace. Even though most workers are really not even aware of the relevancy to their learning and sharing of information, we just do it and we're really not thinking about it. We know from our readings that the theory of multimodality focuses on meaning-making resources, the visual, spoken, gestures, written, and other types of resources to help us make meaning. There's also some assumptions. There's an assumption that there's a social shaping of these resources that over time become more refined and used to make meaning. And we also need to understand that multimodality recognizes that people facilitate meaning through sign making that influences their motivations and the context of the information that they're receiving. So, how do we solve this problem, this workplace communication problem? Well, first, we need to understand that all communication is two-way and requires a maker of the information and an interpreter of the information. The meeting environment is one typically in which participants are receiving a message from the maker, meaning the meeting facilitator, or the other participants, and from that initial message, they're making an interpretation that's intended to produce a result. That result being a task, assignment, or even a learning opportunity. Most often, there is little consideration given to the modes of spatial representation in the workplace. Is the environment right for the communication? Was there appropriate use of things like audio representation, written, or even the oral language? As we are now in a global world, we have to think about the oral language also. So as Kress indicates, as the designers of information, we have that task of modeling the communication with consideration of the social relations with the audience, the fits of the mode, meaning the audience and the message, and with the communication environment that is appropriate for the audience. So the goal of any solution to this workplace communication problem also requires that we understand that people communicate differently and that a framework exists upon which meaning can be through those semiotic interactions. Organizational team meetings can be, complex mixture of cultures, experiences, and priorities. We need to think about how do we best approach the goal of establishing this productive team meeting environment. Well, I would recommend that, we give consideration to the spatial representation of the meeting environment. We need to evaluate it to determine if it's even, optimal for the technology in the space. You go into meeting rooms and, it's unorganized. There's not enough space for the participants. The technology is not appropriate, so on and so forth. We also need to consider, how can we design the written tools or prompts that are required of communication that kind of guide the meeting participants in a manner that the flow of information is delivered as intended. But also, we don't want to stifle that, mechanism of, we want to make sure that participants can receive and interpret that information and also execute the appropriate actions that are required of the meeting. So just to wrap up, I just want to say that, the multimodal analysis of the workplace and a problem I discussed, it does require an understanding of the participants of the multimodal resources available to them. Do we understand what's available? We also need to consider those semiotic interactions, the mixture of those cultures, experiences, and the priorities of participants to ensure that we have the framework in which we can foster that meeting culture of collaboration, creativity, and information to appropriately receive the intended message.